Assalamu alaikum, Jazakallah, Dr. Saqib. It's a great honor for me to present here at the Muslim 24 conference. A very quick introduction. I mean, water is something that has been a major part of my life. Have created many projects that have served many communities in preserving water and also the environment related to water. So with that, I do want to start with some verses from the Holy Quran. The water has been mentioned in the Holy Quran at many different places. And this one in particular, I want to just read this out. Have those who disbelieved not considered what the heavens and the earth were a joint entity, and then we separated them and made from water every living thing. Then will they not believe? So water is an essential part of our life. You realize the need of clean water when you go to certain places where it's not readily available. In the U.S. and other Western civilizations, it's been taken for granted. You turn the tap on, the water's there. But there's a lot of background how we get the water that we enjoy in our daily lives. There are several sources of drinking water and the water that we use for our daily lives. And then one of them is an aquifer. And so I'm going to take a little bit deeper dive in what an aquifer is. So aquifer is an underground layer of rock that contains water. The water is stored in pores within, in rocks, and it's like a sponge. Just imagine a sponge. It's holding water. Generally speaking, if you want to access that water, you have to drill a well. We will talk about different types of aquifers, but if some of you may have private property that has wells on it, a lot of public systems they also depend on well water. So, it's like a sponge, and just imagine it's a finite resource. So if you start drawing too much water out of that sponge, what's going to happen? I'm just trying to, make sure that you all understand, what some of those limitations are. So there are different types of aquifers, and I've got a little graphic over here. We use the term confined aquifer, which is basically that sponge or that layer is sandwiched between two impermeable pieces of geology. It could be a rock. It could be, So that's a confined aquifer. Then we have an unconfined aquifer, which only has a impermeable layer at the bottom. So it gets recharged every time it rains. The water enters the ground, and and that impermeable layer supports it. And then you must have heard artesian aquifers, and these are aquifers that are sort of confined aquifers, and just because they are under pressure, a good example would be Abu Zamzam, for example, right? That's a good example of an artesian aquifer because that was under pressure. So that is, I just want to draw that parallel over there. So that is how an aquifer typically, there are some different types of aquifers. Now, let's get into a little bit of, how are aquifers being impacted these days. Of course, human activity is the #1 cause of the water quality that's being affected in aquifer. The groundwater, you must have heard this term, it's basically the water that is contained in the aquifer. It's as we just take a straw and suck out of that sponge more and more, we create a negative pressure which allows other contaminants to basically permeate that sponge. And that is what's driving it. So, for example, when we use fertilizers, we use pesticides, we develop right next to a coastal community which is impacted by salt water from the ocean. Just imagine, as you create a low pressure area from that pressure resource, other things are there to take its place, So this is a little graphic that sort of represents what's really happening to the aquifer. I have a few case studies over here And these are, I mean, it varies from place to place. The threats vary from place to place. For example, in New York and Florida, these are coastal communities, right? It's a small strip of land where people have wells, and again, you got the wells, and you got both private and public wells, and again, they're taking away from that resource. And what's happening is that there was industrial pollution in these areas back in the day. You're getting all those pollutants getting sucked into that sponge, and the quality is decreasing. Florida, California, again, similar issue over here, especially in Florida. There's salt water intrusion. Water is coming inland further into and polluting those natural resources, the aquifers that we have in here. Arizona has a totally different situation. What's happened is that sometimes some of the rivers and lakes are fed by underground aquifers, and because of global warming and other things, and also overconsumption, they're not getting recharged. So you're left with, a very finite source. I do want to talk about a little bit about the effect of, I'm just going to give you one example, fertilizers, right? Again, when farmers, you can go to the north, like Midwest, for example. The issue over there is, again, as they're pumping more and more water, the fertilizers that are in the upper layers, they go down. As people are drilling more wells, if they don't protect their wells, their private or public wells, they become a source of that pollution from animals, from fertilizers. Everything goes into that precious resource and it destroys it. So in this case, nitrates, for example, the maximum contaminant level for nitrate in public drinking water is 10 milligram per liter, right? So, more exposure, it's going to really cause some serious health issues. So birth defects, cancer, and other adverse health effects, right? So in conclusion, what I'll say is, if you can do one thing, one takeaway from this conversation, this presentation over here, is that number one, please realize the importance of water. It is a finite resource, That's the biggest threat to the sources, including aquifers. So please try to consume less water, okay? Because demand is directly related to pollution. The more water we use, the more pollution we're going to create, the more impact it's going to be on an aquifer's health. So start looking at your personal systems. There's a gray water system. There's other resources of water that are not as drinkable water quality, but they can be used for purposes that we use. Take shorter showers, for example, right? It's just about the culture of realizing how important water is to us. Just to give you an example, in the Western world, one person uses 100 gallons per capita per day. If you take that same equation to a third world country, they don't even have 20 gallons per capita per day. So just gives you an idea of how much more water do we waste here. So at the end, I just want to conclude by saying, Jazakallah for the opportunity, and hopefully you guys realize the importance of aquifers and the threats. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.